Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I am very excited today to have my good friend, Tony T. Tony's been sober since February 4th, 2014. He's a proud member of the Tennessee group who meet on Thursday night at 7 p.m. here in Knoxville, Tennessee. He's been married to the amazing Sarah since 2017, and together they've created a vibrant blended family with 4 awesome kids, Lauren and Rory out in Virginia, and Liam and Fiona here in Knoxville. Tony's pack also includes Ollie, a Papillion Chihuahua. Now, Tony's going to make fun of me for the way I pronounce that. I know it's coming. With big energy, and Honeybee, a lovable pit mix with an even bigger heart. When he's not showing up for his recovery and family, you'll find Tony casting a line, swinging a golf club, or laying down grooves on the bass guitar. Tony says he's no poster child for recovery. I kind of disagree with him on this one. But thanks to a God of his understanding and some rock-solid men in the program, he's living sober one day at a time. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing well, Joe. Glad to be here. Glad you asked me. It's quite the honor and privilege.
I'm so grateful that you've done it. Did I pronounce Papillion Chihuahua correctly?
It's one of those French words. It's Papillon. So,
dang.
Yeah,
I knew it.
He's our favorite little asshole. We like to refer to him as.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you being willing to share your experience, strength, and hope. And so, tell me, what was it like growing up, Tony?
You know, Joe, I had it pretty sweet. I got one older brother who's kind of a personal hero and best friend nowadays. We grew up fighting like cats and dogs, but we always had each other's back. 2 wonderful parents. My dad was a very busy traveling salesman for the family business. We owned a tortilla factory for nearly 50 years. Sold it just recently in about the last 5 to 6. So it was fun. Summers we would spend working at the warehouses. My dad was always a big proponent of teaching us the value of labor and what it took to earn a dollar, as much as I may have fought those lessons. So we went to the best schools. My parents were both huge on education. My dad went to the University of California, Berkeley. That was something that was always impressed upon us, is that no matter what they can take away from you, they can't take away what's between your ears. And I'd like to tell you that I spent a lot of time, and lots of people go to college for 8 years. I kind of did that off and on at the junior college in our hometown. Spent more time drinking at the bars and not really showing up to class. But I'm going to rewind a little bit in that I think the first time I remember having a drink, I was about 10 or 11 years old, and we went to a family wedding in Nebraska. Both of my parents are from Nebraska originally. So, one of my cousins asked me, "Hey, what do you want?" And I said, "Oh, Coke, whatever." And so little did I know, after about halfway through this Coke, when I kind of get this warm, glowy feeling and everything kind of quiets and, you kind of feel at ease with the world. And I remember asking him after about the second one, when I was really, really feeling pretty good, "Hey, what's in this?" And he said, "Well, it's Jack and Coke." And so I realized that they do stuff a little differently in Nebraska. But that was just that first moment of ease and comfort from alcohol. And I don't think that taste ever quite left my lips for the next 25 some odd years. But life was sweet. I got to do just about everything I wanted. And I mean that, like, if there's a sport out there, I've probably played it. If there's an instrument out there, I was probably tried to attempt to learn it. But no, had a great childhood. I would love to tell you I have some traumatic background and I have all this insight into why I became an addict and alcoholic and why I had to bump my head so many times along the way. But I think the one thing I noticed early on is I never really quite fit in. According to Ancestry DNA, I am mostly Germanic and indigenous U.S. Native American background. So therefore, I am a Wiener Schnitzel. And as far as growing up, being mixed race, we went to the nicer schools, but we definitely weren't the kids with a ton of money. We kind of were in the middle of the groove, but, it was definitely one of those keeping up with the Joneses moments, but I enjoyed school for the most part. It was something that went for the social aspect more, stuck around and learned a little bit, but and then the other thing that was big growing up was going to church. So we were raised Catholic and we went to mass just about every Sunday. I had the privilege of being an altar boy. My dad used to always love to joke that I was going to grow up to be a priest. Wow, I sure fooled him. But it's something to where today I am lucky to have the God of my understanding. And a lot of it does include what I was educated in as a young man. Today, my God has evolved thanks to some incredible sponsors and some self-learned or earned wisdom. But I think that's what's amazing about this program to me, as far as being in the fellowship, is that you can learn so much from so many different people and so many different walks of life. And I know I'm kind of going back and forth into probably what I should be discussing, but I'm a little more Quentin Tarantino than I am A through B. But I think it was probably about freshman year. Oh, no, I rewind that. It was the summer between 8th grade and freshman year. And one of my buddies, we were over at his house, and California is very much the land of milk and honey. There's wine everywhere you go. There's beer everywhere you go. Nobody really cares everywhere you go, to being honest. So we would sneak beers from our parents' fridge early and young enough. And the first time I really remember arriving is one of my best buddies' older brother gave us some weed to smoke. And, I figured, why not? Why not give it a try? I was always that kid. Why not? It's Tony backwards. So why not? And so, I just remember the ease and comfort that came after that first few pulls off of that. And that from there, it was just the training wheels were off. Most of my freshman year, I was lucky enough, and that my older brother, Andy, that I alluded to earlier, he was a senior at the same high school. So what that meant is I got to hang out with the older kids and go to the cool parties and really do just about whatever I wanted. And the one thing my brother also very much enabled me to do is he did not prepare my parents for the terror that I would be. He was the golden child. He did what he was supposed to do. He did what he said he was going to do. He was honest about what he said he was going to do, to where none of those traits really hit me over the head somehow. I lied about everything I could because, as a gentleman in the program likes to say, that the truth was just not going to work. And so something for me I was just thinking about the other day, reminiscing about how many years it's been since I've been out of high school. And I'm not the greatest mather, but I know it's been closer to 20 than anything. So actually, I take that back, closer to 30 than anything. But it turned from showing up to school so I could go to practice, showing up to enough practice so I could play in the games, and playing in enough games to where the teachers justified giving me B's when I showed up to class. That way, the sports teams looked good. The teachers were happy. The parents were happy. The families were happy. Learned some great knowledge along the way. Had some great coaches. Had some great teachers. As to say, I very much had some wonderful things laid before me. And then as I slowly kind of transitioned, sophomore year, it went a little more. Once I got the freedom of having a license, that was incredible. I started visiting my brother at college. He was in Berkeley. So I really got to see what college was. Well, at least the party scene really was. I went to class with them a couple of times, and that was a struggle to show up to. So anyway, it kind of just progressed. It went from maybe having a few beers every weekend to then having a 6-pack every weekend. And then it just kind of progressed a little further along the way. And then once it was time to find hard alcohol and harder drugs, and, it became, I think somebody said it best, and I know it's not an original quote, but this is really a disease of more. It's one of those, I started with a little, and then a little became more and more. I know that's a song lyric, anyway, that's just kind of what happened. And after 3 years at the private Catholic high school, they decided they had enough with me. So I actually ended up transferring to a public high school in my hometown, where luckily enough, I knew a lot of the kids there from crossing paths throughout high school, and it's a small enough town. And so I had a blast of a senior year. I laugh about it. I was joking with it as somebody with work the other day that one of my classes was actually TA for the janitor. So he would have me go pick up a bucket of trash. And he said, once I was done with a bucket of trash, I could go home because it was my last class of the day. So what I used to do, in never being the scheming type of guy, was I'd bring my own bucket of trash from home and leave it in my car. And then once it was time to go get that bucket of trash I needed to get, I'd just go to the car and leave the empty bucket in the car and then bring out the full one. So, and I think that's just some of the ingenuity that us addicts and alcoholics have. We're always going to find a way to get around something or over something or under something or through something. Now I get to apply that determination to life, though. So, I realized in high school, especially getting to go to college with my brother, that college just wasn't for me. It just wasn't going to be my thing. And that was an easy enough decision, but I was kind of on the fence of what I really wanted to do. Do I stay in my hometown? Do I go to the JC? Somehow I got this amazing thought that I was going to go ahead and join the world's finest guns and drinking club. They also like to refer to that as the United States Marine Corps. So about 7 days after high school graduation, I left for Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. It's right next to the airport. And it was probably one of the toughest 90 days of my life, but also one of the most rewarding. I was lucky enough to earn the title Marine, though I wasn't a very good Marine, because what happened over the course of the next 4 years was a lot of debauchery, a lot of drinking, a lot of illicit drug use. And I know this may come as a shock to some of you that think our armed forces personnel are some of the finest people in the world. And don't get me wrong, they very much are. But there is also a subset, just like anywhere, there's always that 10% that we specialized in just not quite getting arrested until I did, and I was able to meet, there's somewhere in the literature in the big book that it says we meet some of the most amazing women this world has to offer. I know I'm kind of paraphrasing that, but there is a line in there. And I was lucky enough to meet one of those women. My oldest, Lauren, who's 24, and then her younger brother, Rory, who will be 19 here shortly, are a product of her and I meeting at a very young age of, I think I was 19 at the time. And I don't know what that woman saw in me, but I saw love and adventure and good times and having a little bit of family and having somebody close to me on base, because that wasn't so available. But I scraped by somehow, just barely. But it wasn't long after I got out of the Marine Corps. It was within about a 6 to 8 month window that I found some other substances beyond just kind of light drugs and alcohol, shall we say. And dried goods ended up getting me to my next chapter and adventure in life, which was what I like to refer to as a full scholarship to the University of California. The problem was it was at the San Quentin campus as a guest, a full-time stay at the California Department of Corrections. I do attribute it nowadays, at the time, not so much, but I do attribute it nowadays to where it is very much taught me how to be a much better man And like most things in life, it's because I was able to meet some incredible men that instilled upon me their wisdom and knowledge and love and understanding. There is truly an honor amongst thieves. There is very much a brotherhood, even when you're down in the deepest of shitholes. But it was something for me that's where the original seed was planted for me to learn about the fellowships. And that one of my first cellies, his name was Tiny, and he was anything but. He was about 6'4", 300 pounds plus. But every day I saw him read this big blue book. And he may have only spent 5 or 10 minutes a day on it, but it was something that he did. And I remember probably for the first 6 months that, I just kind of observed. And one day I finally got up the nerve to ask him. I was like, dude, what are you reading there? And he's like, oh, it's they call it the big book. It's the Alcoholics Anonymous book. He said, the reason I'm here, young man, was actually serving a 15 to life sentence, which means that minimum he would do 15 years and maximum he could do anywhere up to life. He was a drug addict himself that got an attempted murder charge at a very young age. He was only, I think, 20 at the time. And he said to me that day just something very powerful. He said that this book could change your life if you let it. And I thought, oh man, kind of like most things at that age, it fell on deaf ears. He at the time, I believe, would have been already, I think, about 30. He had done about 12 years, I think, on his sentence already. Anyway, all that to say, kind of like my Marine Corps career, I scraped by in prison, didn't make too many friends, wasn't looking for too many friends, didn't make too many enemies earlier either. You kind of learn how to go along and get along. And it is very much a kindergarten to where, you use your manners, you do your best, you share what you can. And as to say, misery loves company to some extent. So once I got out of prison, I was lucky enough to where one of my cousins, who's more like a brother, his name's Tomas, we spent a ton of time together, and he introduced me to his circle of friends. And we played basketball, and we went to movies, and we played tennis, and we went skateboarding. All the stuff that I was probably really supposed to do in my 20s, but didn't really give myself that opportunity. I paroled at just a little over 25, actually. And so, funny enough, not too long into me being out of prison, kind of like most things, I met another amazing young woman. We dated for a while, but one thing I found interesting, and it's funny how life kind of places certain people in your path, though you may not know it at the time. Her father was an alcoholic who attended AA meetings. And at that time, I learned that prison wasn't the best place for me to go. And I kind of knew the equation that was a certain amount of drugs and a certain amount of alcohol was going to lead to prison. But I was trying to figure out that correct equation to where I could still get away with just a little bit of drugs and plenty of drinking and whatever I might have really enjoyed to do. So I decided that I'll give an AA meeting or 2 or 3 or 7 a chance. And so I did. I started going to meetings, met a great group of youngsters, but I think I stuck around for about 9 months just doing fellowship and just showing up to meetings. I didn't learn at that point that the real magic was really in the steps and getting a sponsor and actually putting in the work. So her and I dated for right about that 9 months, maybe a little right about a year, because that at that point was about as long as a relationship as I could have. Either she found out I was full of shit, or she found out I was a pretty good loadie and nothing much more. And I lived life with like that for several years after that. It was something to where near the end, it was very much kind of the old country song backwards. I was losing the house. I was losing the wife. I was losing touch with reality. I was losing friends. I was losing family. Nobody really wanted much to do with Tony. And at the same time, I couldn't fucking blame him. I was I was an oxygen thief at best. And if I have to explain that, that is just pretty much all I was doing in my life at that point in time, was depriving good people of oxygen. Today, I don't have to claim that right anymore. I like to believe I am helpful in certain people's lives, even if it's as a good, bad example. But today, for me, I never thought that bumping my head along the way for so many years would finally lead me to a moment in life where all those things were going wrong. My wife, at the time, and really more so, we did it because of getting me health insurance so I could go to alcohol and drug treatment. That didn't really quite happen. Funny how life works out, but let's just say I chose a new relationship over that one. Because that's Tony. I'm always looking for the next bigger, better, more exciting thing, because that's life. And that's what I am as an addict and an alcoholic, because I'm always looking for something to fill that void, because nothing else quite fills it properly, until I found out that spirituality does. But we'll get to that. Anyway,
Was there a turning point? Like what was the turning point for you, Tony? Like what was or was it, kind of, it seems like it's building up, to that, your life, as so to say, your story. So what was the turning point?
So near the end there, I think I still give due credit to my dad in that it was probably about 6 months before I finally made the decision to get my shit straightened out a little bit and go to a detox center. My dad said to me one day, remember when that time you tried to get sober for a while there? I kind of really liked what you were doing there. And my dad's always been a very subtle man with his advice. And for some reason that just kind of stuck in my ear. And as much as me and my dad have had somewhat of a tumultuous relationship throughout the years, largely my fault, it was something that kind of stuck with me, that like, wait, okay, if he saw that version of me, and that seemed to be a version of me that he liked a little bit better than, that. But I think also near the end, I was just getting sick and tired of myself. I was getting sick and tired of I remember one of my morning routines, and at the time, to this day, he's my best friend, and we've known each other since we were 13. He would always ask me, because a lot of the times I'd get so drunk I couldn't leave his house, so I'd end up spending the night on the couch. But he would always ask me in the morning, "Hey man, why do you slam a cup of water?" And I told him, well, I don't know where I learned it, but when I slam down a cup of water, it pushes that last little bit of alcohol I still have in my system kind of over the kidneys. And you kind of get a little bit of you had a drink or two moment there for about 20 minutes. And he was like, really? And I was like, well, it works for me. It may not work for you. But, and then obviously after that, it was directly to the liquor store, still kind of prying eyes open. And, it's yet again, California being the land of sugar and honey. All you had to do was go to the local gas station, which was about a half mile away. You didn't have to go to a package store. You didn't have to, show any ID or jump through any hoops. But yeah, it was just getting disgusting. I think one of the biggest turning points I had was the sound of dumping yet another case of bottles into the dumpster. My wife would literally bring me home cases. She worked at Trader Joe's and they had great deals on stuff. That's one thing I won't miss. But I would take a case, an empty wine case, and I would fill it with 12 liters of empty bottles, and in most weeks, it probably only took me about 4 to 5 days to fill up a case of 12 bottles. And I remember we were in this little apartment complex and it was about a minute of a walk to get to the dumpster. So by right about the time the case got a little heavy and I was ready to set it down and chuck it in the dumpster, it was just that shattering sound of glass and just kind of having an inclination of like, I should probably make some changes, but I don't know how. So near the end there, my wife was trying to get me into some type of care and get health insurance set up for me. And I don't know what it came down to, but my last drunk, and they say you should never forget your last drunk, and that's very true in this alcoholic's case, was Super Bowl evening. And all I remember, it was the Seahawks, and I can't even tell you who else at this point. But we had a bar that was literally stumbling distance from the apartment complex we lived in. There was a little burrito place, there was a grocery store, and then there was a little bar called Fiorino's. I will never forget that place. I probably spent about a Ferrari there. So I remember walking back, and they had all these giveaways because, you bought raffle tickets. And of course, I wanted these prizes because they were great. But anyway, I ended up with about 10 pint glasses and a couple of t-shirts and some random bottle openers and all shit I really didn't need. But I remember I had lost my keys. And at that time, my wife was either at her parents' house or I forget doing what. But I just remember sitting on the porch and being so blasted, but just being so checked out that I started launching these pint glasses out into the roadway. And then it became a game. Then I started trying to launch them at cars that were driving by. And that's how checked out I was. And I remember the very next morning, same thing, kind of coming to, and it was probably, I don't know, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And Lucy, what is her name, the ex-wife, said, I'm taking you to detox or you're just leaving this house. Like, she didn't give me a choice. And at that point, little did I know, it was probably one of the best pieces of advice I'd ever taken in life. I ended up going directly to the fridge because I knew, hey, if I'm going to go to rehab, I might as well get one last drunk out of this. And I had about the last third of a liter of scotch. And then I had about maybe 8 ounces of ginger ale. So I combined those real quick into a pint glass and just down that. Because if I'm going to have to give it up, I'm getting fucked up one last time was my motto that day, at least. So funny enough, the detox I ended up at was right below where my grandparents were buried at. So funny for me, I kind of felt that moment that if there was ever a way to make my grandparents proud, if there was ever a way to continue family legacy and be a family man and be a father and be a dad, actually, more importantly, I had to make some changes. And so I spent about 4.5 days there, just miserable, shaking like a snitch at the gangster party, just awful, rotten, no good feeling. One of those I almost wish I would have died somehow. But I remember making a phone call to my mom. Actually, let me take that back a couple steps. I remember one thing happened is a couple of gentlemen from AA came in and brought in a meeting. And same thing, I remember feeling like I was going to throw up. I remember shaking. I just remember being absolutely miserable, pounding headache, everything hurt. But I remember them saying, if you do nothing else when you leave here, go to an AA meeting. And so that little tidbit stuck. And I remember about the morning of like I said, I've been there about 4.5, 5 days. I remember picking up the phone. And my mom is about one of the most laid back, funny, doesn't let too much get to her. Just to give you a little context, my parents actually met at an insane asylum at the St. Joseph's Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. And so they always loved telling that joke because my mom was an RN and my dad was an orderly at the time. So my mom has definitely seen her share of shit show. And so she picks up the phone and she asks me, what the fuck do you want? And that was very out of pocket for my mom because, as to say, she's pretty laid back and great sense of humor. And so I knew I had fucked up. That was the most, wide open that my mom said that to me. I knew I had definitely, that there wasn't any going back. The only place I had to go from there was up. So I decided to ask her the one thing I knew to ask. Can you give me a ride to an AA meeting? And she said she would. She was willing to do that at least. So I think we're transitioning from what it was like to what happened. So there's a little bit of what happened. What happened next was I found this great little Serenity Fellowship Hall, and they had meetings that started at 5:30 a.m. and then the last meeting at night was at 9:30. So what was cool about that for me is at that time I didn't have a job. You know, I was still pretty much an oxygen thief, but working on trying to change that. And so I would go and I would be there at like 5:10, ready for them to open the doors. I would go in and I'd mop or check the bathrooms because it was instilled upon me early on, not earlier. It was instilled upon me early on to be of service. And even if that was something silly about holding the door open for people or getting a cup of coffee for somebody who wasn't so able-bodied or just whatever little bit of advice I could help with, and I volunteered to clean bathrooms, volunteered to clean the coffee pots, just, whatever was needed. And they said 90 and 90. I'm not going to do the math because I'm not a math guy, but let's just say I probably averaged more days with like 5 and 6 meetings than I did 1 or 2 for the first probably about 9 months of recovery. And one thing my dad said early on was, I don't want anything to do with you until you've put together about 90 days of sobriety. And that, was yet another telltale sign of how bad Tony had fucked up life. But I remember calling my dad at about day 94, 95, because I wanted to make good and sure that I had, made a couple of steps in the right direction. And I remember calling my dad. My dad said, why don't you give Harry a call? And of course, my first question is, well, why would I give Harry a call? And he said, just give him a call. And I said, okay, Pop. I always trusted my dad, still do. Very much the man I turn to for advice, him and my brother. So I took him up on it. And I remember calling Harry, and I think I was like half questioning, like, well, why should I call Harry? And he said, well, let's grab a cup of coffee. Oh, so that sounds like a great plan. And so him and I sat down for what I thought was going to be a cup of coffee and a bit of an introduction. And we proceeded to spend the next about 2.5 to 3 hours together just talking. And I think it was one of those, takes one to know one, but it also takes one to reach one. Him and I shared a lot of similar story. He had the ex-wife, he had the problems, he had the couple of run-ins with jail. And I think sometimes that needs some explanation. A lot of people get jail and prison confused. I like to say anybody can go to jail, but prison's where you go after the trial. But basically, in talking to Harry, I found somebody that spoke my language. And I also thought it was incredible that, when initially this man has a house on the hill, he's got a beautiful family, he's got a gorgeous car in the driveway. He has a very reputable job in town. He is somebody that is very well trusted and loved and just an incredible community figure. And I knew at that moment that if a gentleman like that could become that, then even I had a fucking shot at it. So him and I started meeting every Tuesday morning, and I was kind of teasing him early on. There's a great book called Tuesday Mornings with Maury, if you ever get a chance to read it. But I said, this kind of reminds me of Tuesday Morning with Maury, Harry. And he goes, yeah, but I'll do you one better. At least I won't die on you too soon. And I thought, oh, you asshole. Of course you got to throw a joke in there like that. But no, we worked through the 12 and 12. That was kind of a gem for me. It still is today. The big book's fantastic, don't get me wrong. But I feel like the 12 and 12 kind of breathes life into the steps a little bit and kind of fleshes out the details. It kind of, for me, it was kind of an idiot's guide to the steps of AA and NA. But that's where it started. And I remember early on, just the basic things and kind of paralleling the book and the 12 and 12. And I think the moment where it really hit me most is when we hit our knees and said a third step prayer. And that was something that he instilled very early on, that it was a great idea to memorize the third step prayer. And then the other thing he kind of told me too, that was even a better idea, is to come up with my own version of the third step prayer. And so I still utilize both, But I just remember in that moment praying with Harry that I was thoroughly convinced that this program and these steps were working. You know, I didn't have to split atoms. I didn't have to know trigonometry. I didn't have to know how to speak a new language. I just simply had to kind of take in this knowledge Harry was and the program of AA was bestowing upon me, and just take it in and utilize it. And I think for me that made a lot of sense, because in trying my best thinking, I ended up at AA. And so I thank God for that. Don't get me wrong. That's not a negative, but it was nice to kind of have that full circle moment of where at 26, I got introduced into the program. And then at 33, I kind of came and stayed around for the program. I told myself, and I still kind of have this joke, and I don't know if it's a joke, but it keeps pushing me, is I told myself if I can make it a year without drinking, then maybe I'd consider taking another drink. The problem was when I got to that end of that year, I felt so good for not taking a drink. I figured, fuck it, let's try another year. Today, I still kind of have that mentality. And one of the things I joke about saying some days is, you know, if my life keeps going this way, I'm probably going to get really fucked up tomorrow. Problem with that is when I wake up in that morning, it's not tomorrow, it's today. And so I choose to stay sober. And I think one of the things that really speaks to me, because I like stuff at a basic level, is that you got to trust God, clean house, and help others. It really is as simple as that. You know, I get back tenfold what I put into this program. I get back tenfold what I put in at work. I get back tenfold what I put into friends and family and relationships. And I thank God for that. I thank AA for that. But I think most importantly, I thank God that he put some incredible gentlemen in my way, Joey V being one of them. But
you're too kind. You're too kind.
But no, today life is good. I can't say that that cup of coffee would, if I told you that 11 years and some change after that, I'd still be sober. One of the things I like to always say is if I had to sit down 11 years and some change ago, I would never have told you that I'd be living in Knoxville, Tennessee, that I'd have a wife and children in my life, that I would be employed, that I would have a few dollars in my bank account. But most importantly, that I would have some incredible relationships with the people that I know and love. Family's in my corner. We actually just visited California about a month ago, and had an incredible little get together of family and friends, of which Harry was there. So it was fantastic to see him. But yeah, I used to always hear early on people say, oh, you'll get to live a life beyond your wildest dreams. And, you know, I always really thought that, like, come on, man, you're full of shit. I just want to get through the day without having to fucking think about doing drugs or drinking. And, you know, early on that was a challenge. And, something for me that I've always kind of just really took in stride, because my mom was raised by a couple of alcoholics, and you know, no figure far that the apple didn't fall too far from the tree, you know, and I don't blame genetics, but you know, I think it's one of those things, is it's kind of like diarrhea. They say it's hereditary, it runs in your genes. But today, I just try to keep it simple. I just try to do the next right thing. My last gentleman that made a huge impact in my life was named David Gibbs, and he's no longer with us, but he used to always tell me that we get to, you know, I used to always tell, oh, I have to do this, or I got to do that, or, oh, it's mandatory that to where when you learn in this program, you get such a wonderful perspective change that you get to do these things. We're privileged. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm still alive. I'm still sucking oxygen, you know, but I'm definitely not an oxygen thief anymore. I'm able to put that oxygen to good use. But today, life is pretty good. You know, it's not, everything isn't smooth sailing. I actually had probably a rather treacherous last 18 months or so, in that had a little bit of some problems with our youngest daughter, and she faced some legal problems. And then in the midst of that, my sponsor, David, succumbed to his battle with cancer. Fuck cancer. And I say that even more because then the last bombshell I had dropped on me in about the last year was then my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I don't say that to elicit empathy. I don't say that because I feel terrible about it. I say that because with the wonderful people that have been put in my life, thanks to God, thanks to AA, thanks to family, thanks to friends, I was able to walk through all of that without having to take a drink or a drug. My wife was able to experience all those things with me being by her side. I was able to support and love her in ways that I never thought I was capable of. And that's the one thing that this program, that God, that AA, that wonderful gentleman give me is the ability to keep showing up, to be available, to be present, to be loving, to be kind. Some of my simplest prayers I say every day are, God, allow me to treat everybody I encounter today with loving kindness and allow me to be an instrument of your peace. And for the most part, that gets me through the day. I don't take anything too seriously. Most importantly, I don't take anything too personally, because how people treat you is not a reflection of you, but them. And this is all great wisdom that AA has taught me, that friends in this program that taught me, that brothers like Joe, like Robert, like I could keep going on and on naming names, but those gentlemen know who they are. I am truly one of the lucky ones. There isn't Powerball odds on me still being alive. With the amount of drugs I've ingested, with the amount of alcohol that I could fill up swimming pools with. Me and my buddy Chris joke about if we would have possibly spent that money on stuff other than drugs and alcohol, we'd have like gorgeous auto museums of just incredible machines. But I say all that because it took what it took. You know, without all that alcohol, without all those drugs, without all those terrible experiences, without taking all those risks, I would not be around today to realize how special life is and that I get to love others. I get to understand others. I get to help others. That Tony doesn't live life just for himself today. Tony gets to live life, and he chooses to make decisions that ultimately benefit others as well as himself. So I think I'm rambling at this point. I think we might have to edit a few things out here, but no,
I don't think we do, Tony. So, you mentioned, the struggles Sarah's going through and that you've been by her side, losing David. We both knew David and he's a wonderful man, and some of the other personal issues. And how do you get through that sober? How do you that's where I think the miracle is. Like, and for you, like, how do you get through that sober?
Oh, fantastic question. And not to sound too cliche, but a lot of the times you hear guys throw around, you just got to do it today. You just got to do it for this 24 hours. And to that, I say, fuck that. Sometimes I will do shit 2 minutes at a time. Sometimes I will take it deep breath by sob, by deep breath, by sob, by deep breath until I can function through that 2 minutes. I think it's one of those, the old Winston Churchill, never, never, never give up. And I think if I can maintain that, even on my worst days, because don't get me wrong, Joe, there's days I'll catch a certain waft of something and it reminds me of something wonderful. I see an ad on TV that just makes it look like that beer would be the most delicious thing ever. And I should have 12 of them because I can't have one. But I think what got me through is the simple suggestions that got laid at my feet. They call it a spiritual toolbox is what you're able to learn. But I think some of those basic guidelines for me that I learned early on are hit your knees. You got to find a God of your understanding. It doesn't matter where you start at. But you got to have something bigger than yourself to believe in. And for me, that is a God of my understanding. It is Jesus, not to get too on any one God, but I do still believe in the Trinity. And like I said, this program has made my faith really blossom. One of the greatest exercises I was ever given by David was he wanted me to write a list of all the things my God is. And he said at the top of that list, I would suggest that you write that God is going to keep me sober even on days that I might not want to be sober. And so I did that. And I remember, that was number one. And then I wrote down about, 25. And some of them were like, God doesn't care if I say fucking prayer. Or, God won't get upset if I'm not on my knees when I pray. Or, and all the important stuff, like my God is hilarious. My God is all understanding and all knowing on all these things. And one of my favorite words to hear about God is Joe likes to say it is omnipotent. So that for me truly embraces so many things. Like, if my God is this omnipotent individual, he doesn't care if I swear. I'm not going to hurt his feelings. I'm not going to kick him in the shin. I'm not going to spit in his face. There's nothing I can say or do. But the one thing I know, just like most of the gentlemen in AA, is that we're forgiven. We have another chance. We have another chance today. We have another chance in the moment. We have another chance in every time we reach out to help somebody else. But I think for me, not to scare anybody away with the God talk, is I have friends in this program that are Buddhist. I have friends in this program that are atheist. I have friends in this program that are all different walks of religions and thoughts and spirituality. And it works for them. And all that to say is that is one of the greatest things I think I enjoy about the recovery community is there is no judgments. It's not that if you believe in something different than somebody else does, you're going to be shunned. But I guess all that to say, to circle around to kind of one of my earlier comments, is that in life, I never really felt like I fit in. I wasn't the right color. I didn't speak the right language. I wasn't wearing the right clothes. I didn't listen to the right kinds of music. I didn't have the right haircut. Nobody gives a fuck about that in the fellowships. They're there to love you. They're there to help you. They're there to lift you up. One of the greatest sayings I think I hear quite often is that we truly get to stand on the shoulders of giants. The program of AA has only been around some 90 odd years, but I think it's pretty incredible how many millions of people it's been able to reach and influence. Today, like I said, I don't have the best of everything, but I try to make the most of what I do have. Having that perspective change on having a little is just enough is huge for me. I don't ever want, I don't know how to say this properly, but like if I ever get everything I want, it's probably would be a dangerous thing, but I am very grateful for all the things I do have. And I think that's one thing that was taught to me in AA is the perspective of that gratitude is an attitude, and that gratitude lists are very important, and that we could all find 47 things to fucking complain about, but to find a few things to be grateful for are huge.
So that's, I had a friend of mine said, he said, I have something that most people don't have. And I'm like, what's that? He's like, enough, and especially for people like us, I think, and you mentioned it early in your story, and you said we are the people of more, whatever it is, I'm certainly like that, and I think what recovery has given to me, and from you telling your story, it's enough, we have enough, so speaking of gratitude, what are some of the things you're grateful for today?
I try to keep it simple, Joe. When I wake up in the morning, it was suggested to me by a wonderful friend of mine named Matt F. that he said, before you actually let your feet hit the floor, say a prayer. Even if it's a quick and easy one, like, hey, thanks God for waking me up, and please help keep me sober today, and thanks for keeping me sober yesterday. Help me help others, and that really stuck with me early on. I was lucky enough to become a part of a little group that was held in a back room of a gentleman's house, and it was invite only. It was a little secret squirrel, but there I unlocked some of the most amazing moments, experiences, spiritual experiences. That I was just surrounded by a group of men that loved me. They didn't care what I looked like. They didn't care what I sounded like. They didn't care how many woes I was going through. They didn't care how much help I needed at that point or how fucking clueless and lost I was. They loved me through it all. And luckily enough, that group of men, for the most part, give or take a few that we've lost along the way, sober and still being great individuals. We meet every Tuesday night at a local church. We're not an official AA meeting, but we are a church-sponsored recovery group. And I think that is something for me that I can't ever give back enough. Or, if I make it every Tuesday for the next 40 years of my life, I won't be able to give that group back enough, but I'll keep trying. I think I might have got off on your topic a little wrong direction there.
It's all good. It's all good. I think, you mentioned that meeting, and that's where Tony and I met, was at Mike Kay's living room, and that meeting is still going. So if there are any men out there in Knoxville, 7:00 on Tuesday night at Concord United Methodist, you could see Tony and I for sure every Tuesday, and there's some wonderful men there. So what would you say if there's somebody out there listening, who's feeling hopeless, and doesn't know what to do? What suggestion would you give to somebody who may be listening who's feeling hopeless right now?
I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. We always try to do stuff on our own. I'll do this myself. I'll do this my damn self. I'm going to do this alone because nobody else is going to do it for me. One of the greatest gifts that ever was told to me is that you can't be afraid to ask for help. I was not living much of life. I was pretty much blottoed drunk by within an hour of waking up, and continued that throughout the day. And I was pretty convinced that I was going to die any week, day, month, year soon, either by driving and wrapping my car around something or by consuming a little too much of something. But I was pretty resigned to the fact that fuck it, drive fast, take chances, live a beautiful corpse. But today, I think the biggest thing I've realized is, thank God I found recovery. Thank God I wasn't too smart or difficult or proud. That's probably the biggest. I found a little bit of just enough humility to ask for help, and that did make all the difference.
Well, is there anything you wanted to say that we haven't talked about, Tony?
I think it gets thrown around a lot that this is a simple program for complex people, but it is very true. We always thought we could think our way out of everything or act our way out of everything or put enough hard work into every figure. We were so freaking clever figuring out how to stay loaded all the time and, convincing others that we were just fine. Everything's good here. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about the fact that I'm sweating 85 proof. But to me, I think you have to be able to ask for help, and you have to really realize that once you get to these programs, it is the simple suggestions. I think the biggest thing, this is one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on, but Harry would say it, is you come to AA and you realize, or NA, or whatever program you want to work, but it is really, for the most part, about God's will. And I don't mean, you can insert whatever God you want there to be, but God's will for me is that kind of what I alluded to earlier, is that I'm going to trust God, I'm going to help others, and clean house. And if you do those few things, things works out. And I had this mystery of, what's God's will for me? And Harry explained it really well. He said, God's will is three things. It's acceptable, it's doable, and it's usually right in front of you. And just to expound upon that a little bit, acceptable meaning you're not getting called in front of the judge, the wife doesn't want a divorce, The neighbor's not going to scoff at you. Doable, meaning it's not uphill. You know, you're not having to push that boulder uphill all day. You don't have to be able to split an atom or any of that good stuff. And most importantly, and this is the one thing that he would always point out in this, out of the three, is that it's usually right in front of you. So I know for me, in battling through a lot of, mental hurdles, shall we say, or intellectual Olympics, because like I said, I could always try to figure and reason or somehow come up with something really crafty to get my way out of something. I had to realize in AA that all I had to do was the simple suggestions that were right in front of me. I didn't have to try to reinvent the wheel. So I try to keep it acceptable, doable, and try to look right in front of me. And for the most part, Tony's day goes pretty smoothly, despite challenges. So, because challenges are going to keep happening.
Yep. Yeah, they are. And that's life will be lifey. That's for sure.
Yes.
You know, and, but I really appreciate you sharing, your story. I just love you. You have, and I hope it came across, and I think it did to people. You just have a unique way of telling your story and sharing your experience, strength, and hope. And you have just an awesome sense of humor. And I mute my mic a lot while I'm doing this, so for people listening. So you won't hear me laughing, but I am laughing, and Tony can probably see my goofy face when he says something in particular. I'm laughing, but my mic is muted because I just enjoy Tony and being around him. But I cannot let you go without our rapid fire questions. So
Let's
pressure.
Do it.
All right. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
This too shall pass.
What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
Think, because you can get in your head real easy.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Being able to hit the pause button when I'm pissed off.
That's a good one. What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
Oh, we just saw him and SZA live in concert, so I'm going to say Kendrick Lamar. There's a lot of tracks, but I'd probably say either Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe or Money Trees.
All right. If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
That I could be independently wealthy so I could do nothing but help others.
What step do you love the most?
The 9th step, because there's so much power in forgiveness.
What step do you love the least?
I think because it's the hardest one you have to come to make, but the first step.
What is one of your favorite movies?
Because I've lived this to some extent, but Shawshank Redemption.
Nice. And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
The band's been waiting.
There's a good bass player coming. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experience, strength, and hope. It's been an honor, sir.
Thank you very much, Joe. It was a blast.
A new episode is released every Thursday at noon. You can listen to the show in your favorite podcast apps, Amazon Audio, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share because someone out there needs to hear this today. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all have a good day.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's experience, strength, and hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to the Cup of Joe Show.